Hello, friends. I have got to be honest. I am recording this while I'm in the midst of a pretty bad flare up of a bunch of chronic health issues that I've got going on. Actually, like all of the chronic health issues that I have in the background that I don't think I've talked about on this podcast before. I don't have any serious in the sense of being life-threatening chronic health issues, but I suffer from chronic pain. I've had unrelenting back pain for the past 4+ years, and I've had chronic pain on and off for over 10 years. I have bouts of chronic fatigue. I get migraines and dizziness and all sorts of other fun things like inflammatory related things that I have never gotten any answers about. I've gone to many practitioners. I've tried many different dietary changes and supplements, and I've tried Western medical interventions and more kind of Eastern, like out there woo-woo interventions. And I just have not gotten to the bottom of this. This is kind of an ongoing, lifelong thing that I've been dealing with. And hopefully one day I will get some answers or find something that works for me. But for now, I go through plenty of periods where I feel totally fine. And actually, I just went through probably the longest stretch in quite a while where I felt pretty good energetically. My energy felt good and overall feeling good, besides for the chronic pain stuff, which is really just an ongoing, unrelenting thing. But I found a way to work around it and feel good and all of that. And then just the past few days, it just hit me like a brick. Like all the things that I have kind of in the background have come to the surface. And I go through these periods also where my sleep is really bad. And I've just been in this really bad cycle with sleep. And I think it's just catching up to me. And I'm just feeling like garbage, honestly. So why am I recording this podcast episode? Really good question. Because this relates not directly, but it does relate to the topic that I want to talk about today, which is the idea of a personal brand versus a company brand. And this is something that I get questions about a lot because it can be really tricky to know where are you leaning into? Or if you have a strong company brand, do you need a strong personal brand, right? What is kind of the difference? Why would we lean into one versus the other? And the way that relates to this topic that I'm talking about with my health issues is that a big part of my personal brand is authenticity and just being really transparent about the struggles that I've gone through. I've struggled with depression and anxiety. Anxiety is something that I live with pretty much every day of my life. It ebbs and flows, but it's something that kind of similar to my chronic pain. It's just there. It's just part of me. And I've learned to mostly live with it and coexist with it. And then I have these periods of depression, which are more severe and take me a little bit more out of commission. And I have learned to navigate those as well. But they're not fun when they come up. And I've just been really transparent about these challenges. The reason that I talk about it so openly is there's two sides of this. One is that I think it's just something people don't talk about as it relates to entrepreneurship, right? It's both a challenge that comes up in my work, right? If I'm in a really bad health flare, it's challenging to navigate client projects and all of that at the same time. On the other hand, it's actually very common for female entrepreneurs in particular to choose the path of entrepreneurship, at least in part because of struggles like this that are kind of in the background. Because when you're working for a corporate entity or something like that, you're working for someone else and you are having daily migraines or you need to take a nap in the middle of the day because your body is just not allowing you to keep going. It's a lot harder to do that when you're working for someone else than if you're working for yourself and you have control over your schedule. So I know this is something that a lot of my friends who are female entrepreneurs deal with themselves and have chosen this path partially because of that. And I'm not going to say that that's the reason that I chose this path, because I actually was very lucky throughout my career to almost exclusively, with one small window where this wasn't the case, but for the most part, I worked in environments that were very flexible and gave me the room that I needed to kind of navigate these issues. But because it's not something that we talk about openly, women who are struggling with this and maybe have chosen the path of entrepreneurship because of these types of challenges, I think it's just important that we kind of get that out there in the open and talk about it openly and allow space for acknowledging that this is a real thing and that it doesn't make someone less capable of doing a fantastic job at their work and being in their creative zone of genius, right? So that's a very big part of my personal brand. This is a much longer intro than I usually do for my podcast episodes, but on that foundation, I want to talk about personal branding versus company branding and the differences, why you would lean into one versus the other, who needs a personal brand, right? Does everyone need a personal brand? And how to navigate those two sides of things. Thank you for your patience with this intro and let's get into it. Hey there, beautiful human. Welcome to the Bold Women in Business podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Honeyman, a content marketing, branding, and web design expert and founder of Honey Be Bold. This show is all about helping you build the most successful and fulfilling business possible so you can make a bigger impact in the world. Let's dive in. So last week, we talked about some of the most common mistakes that I see when it comes to branding for service-based entrepreneurs. If you listened to last week's episode, you understand branding is not just a logo, right? It's so much deeper than that. It's the essence of who your brand is, why someone should choose you over your competitors, and what really allows you to connect with your ideal clients. So what exactly is a personal brand versus a company brand? Here's my kind of hot take. I don't know if this is really a hot take or not, but I think it's maybe a little bit of a hot take. For service-based entrepreneurs who are either solopreneurs or running small businesses, we're talking like small teams, we're not talking big corporations. I think that a company brand and a personal brand are and should be super duper intertwined. They shouldn't be separate entities where you have, your company brand representation and you have your personal brand representation and nary the two shall meet, right? It doesn't really work that way for small service-based entrepreneurs who are the face of the brand, right? When you're talking larger corporations, which is not anyone that I'm working with, so it doesn't really apply. But when we're talking large corporations, yeah, of course, Nike is going to have its own brand that is distinct from their CEO or their founder. That makes sense. There's this attempt often for solopreneurs to make themselves look more legitimate by talking about themselves in the royal we terms, right? They're all over their website. They say, we do blah, 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 our team, blah, blah, blah. And really, they're the only one that is running the show. Usually, that's pretty obvious. Usually, people can see that. Occasionally, it's represented in such a way that you can't necessarily tell, and it seems like there's more of a team behind the scenes, but more often than not, you can tell. And even when you have a team, if you are the one who's really running the show and you're the face of the brand and you have a team that's supporting you, it still makes sense to be open and transparent about your role in the company's brand, right? And if you are the face of the brand, you're the face of the brand. So I'll use my brand as an example. So I do have a team that helps me get things done at Honey Be Bold. And I'm very open about that. I post about them. They're on my website. I am very grateful for my team's support. And so I don't represent Honey Be Bold as just being me, but I am very much the face of the brand because most of the work is being done by me. I do most of the marketing. I do pretty much all of my prospecting and sales calls and all of that. I'm interfacing with my clients, and then the actual work itself is primarily being done by me with some support from my team. On the admin side, I have a lot of support. So that's kind of the breakdown. But ultimately, when someone is hiring Honey Be Bold, they're hiring me, and my team is part of me but they're hiring me because they connect with me. And so I have my Honeybee Bold brand, the actual branding, my logo, my colors, all of that is coming from my company, but I have a very distinct personal brand as well. And they're very intertwined. If you go to my LinkedIn, I have my company LinkedIn for Honeybee Bold where I post, usually it's specific updates related to the company. When a new podcast episode comes out, that usually goes on my company page. If I post a blog post, if I have an event or anything like that that's specific to the company, that's going to go on my LinkedIn company page. Probably at least 50% of what I talk about on LinkedIn is directly related to my work, but I also talk a lot about my personal views on things. I use it as a platform to really build that personal brand. So people recognize who I am, what do I stand for, what am I all about, and that really comes through. And so they're very, very closely intertwined for a reason. Because when someone is hiring Honeybee Bold, they are hiring me. What you'll notice if you go to my website, for example, is that there are places where the language is in the royal we, right? I'm talking about my team, what we accomplish as a team, but then there are plenty of places where I am very clear that this is coming from me and my brand. And so that's, I think, really, really key is that when you're a small business, you are a small team, or you are the only person, leaning into your personal brand is super, super, super important. And if you only lean into your company brand, you're actually going to be leaving a lot behind. There's a common phrase that people in the marketing world say is that people don't connect with brands. People don't buy from brands. They buy from people. And that's really what's important is when you're building a brand, even if it's a company brand, it needs to be something that is personal, that feels like something that people want to connect with. And if you are representing yourself as a person with your own views and with flaws. And, I talked about in the beginning of this episode, this health challenge that I'm dealing with right now. I don't talk about that for anyone to reach out in sympathy or anything like that. It's more just to highlight that I'm a human, I'm a person, and this is part of the challenge that I'm facing right now. And I think that it's very common when people kind of lean into that company brand without investing in their personal brand, it can come off as very cold, it can come off as unrelatable, and people don't really want to connect with that. And so showing myself as a human with flaws and challenges and shitty days, right? This week has just been pretty shitty. By the time this episode comes out, I hope I will be out of this particular bout that I'm going through right now. But as I'm recording this, it's been a shitty week, and it's okay for me to admit that. And I guarantee that there's going to be someone who listens to this who connects with that and wants to learn more about my work because of that, because it's relatable, not because I'm trying to sell anything, but because it's a human connection. And that's what my brand is built on. And that's really what I think all brands should be built on, even the corporate brands, right? Even the corporate brands that do need to have kind of separation between church and state, so to speak, right? They need to keep things separate between the company versus the people. But if the company brand is not putting in the work to connect with their customers on a personal level, they're going to lose people. They're not going to be able to actually grow the way that they want to. So when does it make sense to lean in to your personal brand versus your company brand? So as I said, I think that you should basically always be leaning into your personal brand. That's probably more important in a lot of ways. It's more important to build your personal brand. Again, built on the foundation of a company brand, right? If you are building a company and you don't have a clearly distinct brand, visually, your messaging, your offerings, who you work with, all of those things, if that isn't clear, your foundation is going to collapse. And that doesn't make for a strong personal brand. So you need that strong foundation. But if you're running a small business and you have a small team or you're a solopreneur, I would say that you need to be leaning into your personal brand. And in many ways, you're going to attract more people through that personal brand than you will through your company brand alone. So you need to be investing in both. When does it make sense to lean into your company brand more? I think when you're looking to scale, right? Let's say you are looking to grow your team and move beyond solopreneurship or having a really small team. Let's say your team right now is, 10 or fewer people and you want to double or triple that within the next couple of years. Okay, well, now there's a reason to start leaning into a company brand and talking about, things like what it's like to work for your company. In my company, I currently have a few people who are working for me, but I don't have a large enough team where it makes any sense for me to build out my company culture guidelines or anything like that, because I'm not looking at this point in time to scale my team in any significant way. There probably will come a time where I'm looking to hire, one or two people, but that's a more personal thing. It's not a larger scale operation. But when you're talking about scaling a company and really growing beyond this like really micro team, now it makes sense to lean into that and lean into what is it like to work for your company? How are we scaling our services? All of that. And if you're looking to scale in terms of your service offerings and your customer base, you want to work with larger customers in whatever way that you're looking to scale. I think scaling is a really key point when you should be leaning into your company brand much more. If you think about yourself when you've gone and you've worked for other companies, when you are scoping out a company, you're going to look at their website and you're going to look at their company culture and what it's like to work there and their benefits and all of those things. If those don't exist, you may not be as likely to think about working there, and you're not as likely to hire this company if you are in a certain bracket of customer. So what's really important is using your personal brand to build trust, and then your company brand can really be used to build structure and scale. So blending these really comes through showing up as the face of the company. As the founder of the company, you are the face of the company. You are the face of the brand, but make sure that you're building those brand assets, the messaging, the visuals, your website, your marketing materials, all of that should be reflecting your business's value, not just your personality, but really the values that come through both your personal and your company brand. You want to make sure that your company's brand voice still feels human and is aligned with your personal values. When I do my Bold Foundation, which is my deep dive brand therapy session, as I often call it, I'm always asking my clients, because I work largely with small business owners, agency owners, things along those lines, I'm usually asking them questions related to their own personal values and then where the intersection is between their personal values and their company values. So the outcome of that is a brand tone, photography style, about pages, all of that really reflects both the client and their mission as a company. So the TLDR on all of this is, I think that people overcomplicate this. People think that they need to maintain this like distance between themselves and their company in order to come off as legitimate. And I'm here to tell you that's just not true. People connect with authenticity. You should not be afraid to show up as your authentic self and show yourself as you are. We talked about this in last week's episode too, but I'm just going to drive this point home. When you try to show up perfectly or to not show the struggles that you're going through, you're going to have a hard time connecting with your clients when they are going through struggles, which all of your clients are going through struggles. The only reason someone would choose to hire you is because they're going through a struggle that you are able to solve. And that's part of how I've built my brand. And I continue to build my brand all the time is by showing up authentically and saying, you know what? Things are not always rosy, and that's okay. And it shows my clients that I understand the struggles that they face and that I have been through it myself. I relate to my clients very much because I am in the same position as them. I am a small business owner with a small team. I'm a female entrepreneur dealing with all the struggles that come along with entrepreneurship while being a woman. And part of that is, as I've touched on in today's episode, part of that is the health struggles that many, many, many women face. That allows me to help solve my clients' problems in ways that someone who doesn't understand those struggles really wouldn't be able to. So, when it comes to really understanding how to build a brand and how to make that come through in a website and how to build sustainable content marketing systems for my clients, all of that comes from my own need to navigate these challenges and find ways to bring all that to life while working through these challenges. All right. This was a little bit of a different episode today, but I hope you got something valuable out of it. And I'd love to hear your thoughts if you have faced any of these struggles yourself, if you're feeling confused about your personal brand versus your company brand or anything else related to branding. Just reach out, send me an email at hey@honeybeebold.com. I'd love to chat and see how I can help. All right. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to tune in next week because I'm speaking with a special guest about time management, which also ties into all of these challenges that we've touched on today. So I look forward to sharing that with you next week. Bye. All right, beautiful human. That's it for today's show. This show is brought to you by my company, Honey Be Bold, with music by Shmookalele. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe on your podcast listening platform of choice. And if you can take 5 seconds to rate and review us, it really helps the show grow. And before you go, if you're struggling to attract and convert your dream clients, be sure to check out my free mini course, 3 Days to Bold Messaging That Converts, and you'll get personalized feedback from me on how to nail your messaging every time. Head on over to honeybeebold.com/free. That's HONEYBEBOLD.com/FREE to sign up. Thanks for listening.